morning, friends. In this lecture, which is on MEG 13 course that is run by IGNOU with respect to English literature, is on making of Dalit Canon basic points. It's a fifth lecture, already 4 have been delivered, and you know about the general idea about the position that Dalits occupy in our society at the present time, and that they have a kind of history. A few aspects have been covered on this particular issue in the last 4 lectures, and today we will talk about the canon and a few basic points which are of theoretical nature. They'll be introduced to you. I'm sure that this theoretical base will help you place the category of Dalit writing specifically in the Indian context, and you'll understand as to what exactly canon is, how it is formed, how it displaces other canons that already exist in society. So I use the word making, which means that there is a conscious activity going all the time in society that makes a canon. Canon doesn't come, of its own in the natural course of living. Canon is actually a product of people who are interested in establishing one thing in preference to another. So that's why I use the word making, and I'll make a few basic points in this lecture. So let me continue. Let me start with the first point, which concerns the very word use of the canon. So canon for me usually refers to biblical writings accepted as authorized, and it can also apply to an author's work as genuine. This is a definition that I found in a particular dictionary of literary terms, and the editor was Canon. So according to Canon, biblical writings in Europe, they are authorized. Somebody says they actually happened, that there was a book in the Bible, and that book is authorized. It has been tested, it has been checked with respect to the message that it gave, when the text was composed, in whatever kind of forms it went through, and finally is made available to you. And if what is there in this book is accepted, then it is accepted on the basis that it's a canon. So canon means the accepted work, the work that is respected by all people who read it, knowing fully well and being told by others that this is what the truth is, this is what the significance is of this particular text, and it's a genuine text. So 2 words in this quotation: accepted and genuine. It is accepted widely by all people. They say that this writing is good, this writing is correct, this writing is moral, and that it is genuine. That there is nothing, mix up in this, and you can't hold an opinion other than the one that is contained in it. So that's what the canon is. I hope you understand. The canon is that particular quality that is given to a work, which is acceptable to all the people, and nobody can question it. It's just like the word of God. Nobody can question the word of God, and therefore it is genuine. So most of the religious books, and this person is talking about the Bible, in the Bible standing in Europe, and therefore the word canon is from there. It's of a certain standard, and it is genuine. So that is one definition of the canon. And then, there is another definition, and that definition we come across this in another dictionary, and let's consider this one, COD, Concise Oxford Dictionary. That's what says the same thing more or less, but see the words. The word may also refer to a collection or list of sacred books. So earlier that was, divine or godly or biblical, is here sacred books, and accepted as genuine. So once again, the 2 words are repeated here in the other dictionary, that it is accepted and it is genuine. So I hope you understand the meaning of canon. Canon is that which is accepted and which is supposed to be genuine. In the second point, because already now we know the meaning of the term, it's not easily available to ordinary students. Only students of literature or students of criticism, they understand this word, and the word is that the work, the dramatic piece, the poem, the epic, the novel, is a canon. It's a standard book. It's a book that cannot be criticized, cannot be negated. Then we come to the second point. In literature, a certain kind of writing is accorded high stature. As all of us know, that Bible has a very high stature. In India, Gita has a very high stature. Vedas have a very high stature. And that literature is canonical. Therefore, you are not allowed to, or at least you are not expected to raise eyebrows and say that, well, how can this be true and all those things, because this is actually synonymous with truth. So it enjoys that kind of a stature, is acknowledged widely all over the country, all over the world, all over parts of big parts of the world. Everybody acknowledges it, accepts it, and that's why there is a stature, and is deemed relevant by all. Now I'm putting another word now here, relevant. What is relevant? Relevant is that it makes sense to me. It is useful for me. It is useful for everybody. So if it is useful for everybody, it is relevant to all, then the word is further defined that you can read these books, you can interpret them in your own way, and you will find for sure, because that's what others tell you, that it will apply to your life, it will apply to my life, and that after having read it, I will acquire wisdom of a higher kind, and there is no doubt about it. The writing of this kind can be said to have become a canon. So now you understand the term still better, that the canon is that it is relevant to us, it's going to make sense to us, we can use it, and we can actually heighten our understanding about life with the help of such a book. And therefore, it for that reason becomes a canon. So in the second point, I have given the reason also as to why a particular book can become a canon, because it is relevant, and this relevance lasting for a long period, it can be centuries, it can be millennia, that relevance makes it into a kind of canon. The third point that I use, let's now look at this. Works that are canonized are accepted by the academicians and scholars as carrying quality content and wide appeal. Now, there is a third point, and in the third point, we refer now not to just the religious book, but by books which are available under the category of writing, literary writing, cultural writing, and that academicians read it. Academicians, people who are teachers, people who are scholars, people who read a lot and discuss and come to certain conclusions, and then they check the conclusions and discussions of others, and on that basis, they finally give the verdict that the book is really that much of worth, and therefore, let us call it a canon. So academicians and scholars, they say that this carries quality content, which means that content can be of many kinds. The content of a book can be less in quality, useless, something that is harmful, something that is dangerous. All those things can be said by the scholars and academicians, and the scholars and academicians enjoy their own reputation in life, and they have been recognized as important people by the regimes under which they work, and they say together at the level of the academic understanding that these particular books that they talk about and that they recommend for others to read, these books are canonical. So the lay reader is expected to read and appreciate the canonized work. When I say the lay reader, all of us, initially are lay readers. We just start, reading books. We are interested in them. We want to, enjoy reading them. We want to get some wisdom out of them. We can then later on share that wisdom with the neighbors, with the friends, with fellow workers. And therefore, we say that this thing is to be read by all. I particularly think in this context of the makers of syllabi. A syllabus, all of us know, is made by a school, by a college, by a university. And in that syllabus, certain books are, picked up from the general available books. And they are, made a part of the syllabus so that students can read those books in the class with the help of the teacher. And then their understanding of that book can be checked and assessed by people who are involved in examinations. So finally they get a degree, and then they say, okay, we have read this book, we have understood it, and there are teachers, there are examiners who examined our copies, and they found our answers satisfactory. So this canonization also happens, not merely with respect to the religious books, which are supposed to be where people put faith in them, but also in the academic world, where you read a novel, you read a poem, you read something, and you find it artistic, more artistic than other books, and therefore, when you make a syllabus, then you tell the people who will read, who will do that course and read those books, that they are books worth reading, and therefore they are important books. When you sit in the class, you don't have a choice. You can't say, I don't like this book, because the person who made the syllabus will say, you have to read this book. Why? Because in that person's opinion, or in the opinion of those who made the syllabus, and this person was supposed to read or study or teach them, then there is a kind of authority behind the books that are there in the syllabus. So the person reading books under a syllabus is supposed to be reading what can be called canonized writing. So understand this, that this who has formed the syllabus committee, who called those members to a meeting, who gave them ideas about some books being good and some books being bad, or if they were left free, then they picked up certain texts. But imagine if out of 10,000 texts, you just pick up 10, then you are giving extra importance to those 10 books, and all others have been left out. So those which are called important, they are the canonized books. If not today, then in the course of time, when students read them in the class, when they discuss, write papers on them, when they read those papers in conferences, and those books are discussed again and again, and there is a pile of articles, pile of books written on those books that you read at some point of time in your BA or MA, then those books become canonized. Canonized, respected. Canonized, to be admired and to be learned from. So students, as part of the syllabus, read certain books because those books have been prescribed for them for reading, and those books therefore are canonized. If they are not canonized to the lay reader before the person became a student, then after having read them, the same person who was lay reader will talk like an expert about those books, and if somebody questions them, the message of those books, then that person, now a scholar, because he has done a degree, he has done a postgraduate degree, then he can say, no, I know about it, and it is really very good, and we discussed it, and all of us agree that it's an important book. So the book becomes canonized in that process of reading, writing, and discussing. And then I stretch the point further and say, even the ones dealing with literature on the professional front acknowledge regarding the importance of these books, and such literature, such a category, then finally gets established. So this point is carried, I think, quite clearly to you, and then I move on to the next point, and this point is the point regarding the context. Since the context is the key factor, canons are constructed by a set of people to further specific social ends. So I'm now going into the idea as to who are those people who recommend those texts to us, and why do they do so? Suppose I ask this question, I don't like those books, and I would like to question them as a scholar who has other books to read, who has read other books, and this person can say, how do you say these books are canonical? I don't agree. So the context is important. In that case, somebody is compelling me to say all that. And one has to go into this process of some people coming to reject and some people coming to accept. So since the context is important, in one context, I can give an example of the national movement in India. Till the Britishers were here in our country as a colonial power. They were there in our country till 1947, when they went away and our country became free. At that time, before they left, in the universities and colleges, it is they who selected the texts. So that was the context. What was the context? It was the context of British imperialism. The British authorities, they completely ruled the course of readers for the purpose of study to pass the exam and to get a job later on that basis. So that was the context. So context means that at that point of time, somebody rules or is powerful, and the person who rules or powerful, he makes the committees, he gets the members, and he knows about the opinion of those members, or those members know the opinion of the person who appointed them, and whatever, it's a two-way traffic. Some people, get professors from one place, and they say, okay, they will be making syllabi. So the people who are making syllabi, they know that we have been appointed by a certain authority, and that is the context. So they want us to perform a role, and the context, for instance, in the 1947 onwards in India would be different. Then Britishers have left, and there are new syllabus makers, and they have their own choices. So they will create perhaps conditions of a new canon, a new respectable list of literature. Since the context is the key, pre-British, post-independence, these are the contexts. Canons are constructed by a set of people to further specific social ends. Ends means aims, purposes. So you have to perform, you have to serve a purpose, and in order to serve that purpose, you pick up books which are to your liking. In this situation, bias is formed. What is bias? Bias means preference. Bias means choice. So I choose a book, and I don't choose another book. So that's a bias. So a bias is formed. Now, a bias is not exactly a respectable word, not exactly a good word. You can always say you are biased, which means that you don't have a free opinion. So bias means already you have formed your opinion and you think that is correct. Suppose I have not that opinion, therefore I would say that the other person who is forcing his opinion on me is a biased person, and that because of that bias he is suggesting a list which I don't agree with. And bias then, I explain this point further, that is that it suppresses another pattern of interests in the process, does not bother the canon making group, canon making section. What do I mean by this? I say that when you form a syllabus in a university, then you are, of course, recommending certain books to be read, but you are also forcing students to read those books. And why do you force those people to read those books? Because you have the power. You are the syllabus maker. And as a syllabus maker, you use that power in order to impose those books on the students who will be sitting in the class and attending lectures or attending discussions. So there is a canon making section in society. These people they are scholars. They have they have good jobs, and they are people with salaries, and they hold meetings, and then they make a list. And of course, all of them are well versed in literature. They are the scholars of big ranks also. There's no doubt about that. What I'm saying is that it is these people who call the shots, who tell us what is good and what is bad. So we see the canon people, the people who form the canon makers, win the upper hand. They have the upper hand. They have the authority, and indeed represent the socially powerful. So I bring in a new context now that in society there are certain powers. These powers operate not directly. The people with money, a person with money can open a college, and then that person can appoint professors there, teachers there, and then that this person has a special bias for a kind of book. And I'm talking not about the individual. I'm talking about the college and the authorities above the teaching work. So that authority will also dictate terms. I can think of certain colleges where the owners of the college, they believe in reform. So they will be talking about reform all the time, and then they will. For instance, there was a movement in India in the 19th century, and it became quite popular in the 20th century. It was called the Arya Samaj movement. It was a reformist organization, and these people said, and they went into education, or the basic education, the primary, the secondary, and the higher education, and they opened a large number of schools and colleges to educate people. And since they were all, adherents of the Arya Samaj movement, therefore, they would always ask the teachers to select books, the syllabus makers to select books which believed in rationality, believed in reasonable kind of a thing, and discussion. So therefore, most of the syllabi of the Arya Samaj movement run colleges would have books, where discussion would be allowed at that point of time. And I'm talking about this kind of a system. Those who are socially powerful in society, nobody can question them, or if you question, then you will fail in your mission of questioning them. So they are socially powerful. They have the money, they have the authority, and therefore they have the upper hand. And it's they who will tell you which books are good and which are bad. The fifth point, at the same time though, I'm making different points so that you can finally reach a conclusion on the basis of your own understanding. And in fact, that is what should be the purpose of education. At the same time, though, I say a given context is not static or fixed. Context is there, of course. There is a context of pre-independence. That context at one point of time appeared very strong, but then came 1947, and that context changed. So, but change is that way important, and change is always happening in a context. So first the change is weak, then the change becomes strong, then the change becomes established, and then another contender, another competitor also appears on the scene, and there is a competition between one context and another, and maybe with the passage of time, the new context becomes major, and the old context which was strong, that becomes weaker. And this kind of activity in society happens invisibly, and one can say that there is a dynamic, there is a power center there which is hidden from our eyes, but it is working all the time. When the social dynamic changes with the passage of time, other interests replace the older ones and press the need to modify or entirely change the particular existing priorities. So I'll refer to this in the context of changing priorities. So priorities change. Suppose at one point of time you want a nationalist kind of a perspective where nation is strong, the nation is to be great and all those things. Therefore, you will start picking up those books which strengthen the cause of the nation. Maybe at that point of time, some others would say nation is fine, but at the same time, the individual's rights also are important. So there will be a lobby in the country which talks about the national priorities. There is another lobby which talks about the individual's rights and all those things, and then a kind of competition between the two begins. This is a process, and this shows the liveliness of a situation, liveliness of a society. And I'm talking, of course, in the long term. I'm not talking short term, and I'm not talking about the existing 2 years or 3 years. I'm talking maybe of the next 40 years and the last 40 years. So 80 years is a long period. And if you have a look at the 80 years period, 40 years before and 40 years later, then you would see that this change can occur. For instance, the books that I liked when I was reading 20 years ago, those books I don't like now. Change has occurred in my perception. I can ask this question for myself. Why is it that at that point of time I liked those books and I don't like them today? Why is it that today I like books, which are totally different from the books that were there earlier? Now, the question is the same, but then I can put it in two different ways, and then I have to answer it. So the answer is that canon formation also follows, and sometimes reads also. Canon formation always follows certain things that appear on the surface in society, and when they are on surface, they start affecting our minds, and therefore we change it. Next are the things that we see. Canon at any given time is restrictive and oppressive, and is an intellectual tool for promoting one kind of opinion at the expense of another. Would you agree with this? That canon formation is a very restrictive activity. It imposes, it is authoritarian. It tells me I'm wrong if I don't agree. So that way, it imposes its pattern, and already this point has been discussed and in some detail. So keep in mind that Canon can be a good yardstick to understand what is nice. At the same time, it restricts my thought, and that should be always kept in mind. It also implies, as I would say, that certain other opinions coexist with the dominant ones and are ever active to gain acceptance. So there is an ongoing process of development, of progress, and in that, certain things which are relevant today may stop to be relevant later on, and this process particularly goes on in front of our eyes, and we cannot overlook it. The previous point takes us to an important movement in history that necessitates change. I'm now talking about the bigger changes in society, and those changes are in the nature of movements, not merely opinions. And when there is a movement, you can disagree with it, but then you'll be swept away. Therefore, the best thing is to accept that movement and start understanding it. In face of the established argument, a counter-argument raises head and draws attention of the broader masses to it. That is the best moment for the basis of new canon emerging. So this point has been explained in the discussion that I presented to you. And finally, I would say one or two more things before I finish this lecture. We note that in a pulsating phenomena, a phenomena which is living, which has a kind of pulse, which is vibrating, new ideas get formed. What happens is that the demand of a new canon and a political demand to overturn the prevailing system of society are raised simultaneously. So canon is actually connected with changes happening in society. It's not simply happening in the field of study, but also in society. The two intertwine. Our job as scholars is to study and grasp such a phenomena with seriousness and engagement. In the context of literature, and now I finish, changes in such a period of intense energy compel us to forge a new vocabulary to capture the spirit of difference. When changes occur, then new vocabulary, new words come. Old words become outdated, and it is new words with which you start thinking, and therefore it adds a very fresh dimension, a dimension of freshness to the world of knowledge. The older vocabulary does not give way to the new one easily. In fact, even as a new canon is accepted for determining an alternative choice, the older canon invents its own ways to resist novelty. But of course, you would know that when the newness has come and become strong, then the old has to give in and disappear finally. In this lecture, we have made a theoretical base for discussing the need and relevance of Dalit canon with reference to changes occurring in our society. I hope you like this lecture, and you will be thinking about the points made in it in the light of the ideas that are going to finally affect our understanding. Thank you.